The Operator Log, Episode 2. How we think. What we mean when we say agentic. To the developer, agentic is a technical property of an LLM framework. To Arco, it is an operational status. Last week, we separated automated from autonomous. This week, we need to do the same thing for a word the industry has already started to ruin: agentic. The problem is not that the word is new. The problem is that it is being used to describe two completely different things. And the gap between those two things is the gap between a business that scales and a business that plateaus. Developers use agentic to describe a capability of the software, the ability to take action, call tools, complete loops without being prompted at every step. That is a useful technical definition. Arco uses agentic to describe the operational status of a business, the condition in which AI is the primary unit of labor, not a support layer on top of human labor. Those are not the same thing, and the difference determines whether your margins hold at scale. This is the operator log. Most companies right now are using AI as a more sophisticated search engine. They ask it a question, it surfaces information. A human reads the output, makes a judgment, and acts. The next step in the workflow requires that the human decision before it can proceed. This is the conversational model, and it is the dominant model even among companies that have been actively investing in AI for 2 or 3 years. The conversational model is not without value. It reduces the time a human spends gathering information. It makes certain categories of knowledge work faster, but it is structurally the same as a search engine with better synthesis. The human is still the operational unit. The AI is the tool the human uses. The industry is moving, and the data now shows it. According to Anthropic's 2025 Economic Index, 77% of enterprise API usage is now what they classify as automation dominant, meaning the most valuable AI deployments have moved away from chat and toward programmatic back-end execution. The AI is no longer answering questions for a human to act on, it is executing processes. That shift is the transition from using AI as a tool to operating AI as the primary labor unit. That transition is what agentic means at the operational level, not agentic in the sense of a software framework, agentic in the sense of a business where AI is the fundamental unit of labor, where the primary operational work is executed by agents running deterministic loops, not by humans processing requests. The distinction matters because the two models have entirely different cost structures. In the conversational model, output scales with headcount. You add more humans to process more requests, handle more accounts, close more transactions. The AI makes each human more productive, but the ceiling on output is still set by the number of people you employ. In the agentic model, output scales with compute. You add more capacity, more agents, more parallel processing, more concurrent workflows, without adding people. The ceiling on output is no longer set by headcount, it is set by the architecture. The cost delta between those two models, between a human workforce and an equivalent agentic stack performing the same revenue work, is what we call workforce arbitrage. That is the operational definition Arco uses, and it is the definition that the rest of this episode will examine, because the gap between a company that has deployed AI conversationally and a company that has deployed it agentically is not a gap of sophistication. It is a gap of architecture, and it is compounding every quarter as compute costs fall and human costs do not. That compounding gap has a name in the Arco framework: operational arbitrage. Arco uses a precise benchmark to determine whether a business qualifies as agentic. More than 80% of cross-departmental handoffs must occur without human intervention, not 60%, not 70%. The threshold is not arbitrary. The number matters because of a structural relationship we named in episode 1, the coordination tax. The coordination tax is the overhead cost of human-to-human alignment, the meetings, approvals, and status updates a business generates every time a workflow crosses a function boundary and requires a human to bridge the gap. In a legacy firm, this task consumes approximately 30% of the operating budget. Below the 80% threshold, that tax does not disappear when you deploy agents. It just applies to a smaller percentage of handoffs. The coordination tax is still accumulating. The human-in-the-loop dependencies are still scaling linearly with volume. If a human must touch every fifth task in a high-volume workflow, adding 10,000 more tasks requires touching 2,000 more of them. You cannot grow without hiring. Cross the 80% threshold and the structural relationship breaks. The human role is no longer a linear function of volume. The remaining 20% of human decisions are the exception the system was designed to surface and escalate, not the throughput of the business. At that point, the coordination tax stops compounding with growth. The business can scale capacity without scaling cost. The human role shifts from labor to oversight. That is the economic inflection point. To make this concrete, consider a document processing operation. A firm receives a high volume of incoming documents, contracts, applications, intake forms. In the agentic model, an agent captures the intake, classifies the document by type and priority, routes it to the correct processing workflow, executes the process according to the rules defined for that document type, flags any exception, and closes the loop by updating the relevant systems. One end-to-end agentic chain. No human click bridges any step. The agent completes the work or it surfaces an exception. Either way, the next step does not wait for a person. Now, introduce a single human approval gate. The classification step requires a human to confirm the document type before routing proceeds. The agentic chain is broken. Every document now has a human latency embedded in it. At low volume, this is manageable. At 10,000 documents a month, the human confirming classifications is a structural bottleneck. Hire more classifiers to keep up with volume. That is not an agentic business. That is a human operation with an AI layer on top of the intake step. The agent is capable. The business is not agentic. The 80% threshold is the line between those two models. Below it, you are building an agent-assisted business, which is better than nothing, but which carries the cost structure of a human operation. Above it, you have crossed into a different economic territory, one where adding capacity does not mean adding people, and where the coordination tax has stopped compounding. Most companies that believe they are building agentic businesses are below the threshold. They have deployed capable agents and then installed approval layers on top of every output. The agents draft. A human approves. The agents route. A human confirms. The agents process. A human signs off. The agents are capable. The business is not agentic. And the coordination tax is still running. 2 episodes in, 2 terms. They are related, but they are not interchangeable, and using them as synonyms is the vocabulary error that causes the most confusion when operators try to map these concepts to their own businesses. Here is the precise relationship. Agentic describes the capability of the software. It is the ability of the system to take action, execute tasks, complete operational loops without being prompted at every step. A software system is agentic if it can operate independently within a defined scope. That is a technical property. It describes what the software can do. Autonomous describes the status of the business. It is the condition in which the business as a whole, its revenue loop, its operational processes, its capacity to serve customers, runs without requiring human management to function. That is an operational property. It describes what the business is. The agentic system is the engine. The autonomous business is the vehicle. You need the engine to build the vehicle. But having the engine does not mean the vehicle exists yet. You can have agentic software inside the business that is not autonomous. That happens every day. A company deploys capable agents. agents that can genuinely complete end-to-end tasks without being prompted at each step, and then installs a management layer on top of every output. A human reviews every agent decision before it executes. A manager monitors every agent workflow before it closes. The agents are agentic. The business is not autonomous. The management overhead is still present. The coordination tax is still running. The revenue loop still requires human intervention to function. The reason this distinction matters is that most companies stop at agentic. They build capable software and declare the work done. The harder work, redesigning the business so that the capable software is actually running the operation, not just supporting the humans who run it, is the work that produces the autonomous business. And it is architectural work, not engineering work. It requires rethinking the decision boundaries, the exception protocols, the scope of agent authority, and the role of the human who remains. That remaining human role is not management in the legacy sense. The person who oversees an agentic stack in an autonomous business is not managing the work. They are managing the system that does the work. They are defining the logic, resolving the exceptions the system surfaces, and expanding the system's authority as the architecture matures. That role has a specific name in the Arco operating model, the stewardship model. We will cover it in full in episode 10. What matters here is the term, because it describes a fundamentally different kind of work than what most operators currently do. The goal is not to build capable agents. The goal is to build a business where capable agents run the operation, and a single competent operator, acting as steward rather than manager, oversees the system rather than performing the work. What does agentic mean in a business context? In a business context, agentic describes the operational condition in which AI agents, not humans, are the primary unit of labor. An agentic company is not a firm that uses AI as a tool. It is a firm where AI executes the core operational workflows. Arco's benchmark: a business is agentic when more than 80% of cross-departmental handoffs occur without human intervention. Below that threshold, the coordination tax continues to scale with volume. Above it, capacity scales without headcount. Here is the test for agentic. If your agents require a manager to approve each step before execution proceeds, you have not built an agentic business. You have built a human operation with capable software embedded in it. The coordination tax is still running. The ceiling on output is still set by the number of people in the approval chain. Cross the 80% threshold, remove the human from 80% of the handoffs by design, and the economics change. Not because the technology changed, because the architecture changed. The agent is no longer a support layer, it is the operation. Agentic is a capability. Autonomous is a condition. You need both, and you need to be precise about which one you are building at any given moment, because the decisions that produce one are different from the decisions that produce the other. The full written version of this argument is memo number 2, what we mean when we say agentic, on the blog at arcoventure.studio. The precise definitions of every term introduced in this episode, and the ones we are building toward, are in the Arco lexicon at arcoventure.studio/lexicon. Next week, overhead. Why it is not an inevitable cost of growth, and why the companies that treat it as one are building a ceiling into their architecture from day one. If your agents require a manager, you have not built an agentic business. You have just hired a more expensive intern. This has been episode 2 of the Operator Log.